Facing legal challenges? You're not alone. You've tuned in to Trust the Plan, hosted by legal expert and law professor C.J. Fiorelli. For the next half hour, Carrie will be discussing critical legal topics like estate planning, Social Security, and disability benefits. To keep your affairs private, to help protect your loved ones, and get the benefits you deserve. Understand your rights, and don't let legal issues overwhelm you. Stay tuned for the information and guidance you need with the host of Trust the Plan, C.J. Fiorelli.
So welcome to the inauguration issue of Trust the Plan. My name is Carrie Fiorelli, and I am absolutely honored to have as my first guest Mr. Andrew Hart, who is an amazing real estate professional. He went to school up north at Menlo College.
That's right.
Andrew, tell us how you got started in real estate, because it's a fascinating story.
Well, first and foremost is the fact that I'm the first guest. I should be the one that's honored, so thank you for having me. And we just had like so many great conversations on how our businesses, just are so connected. So I'm very grateful. But how I actually started was, so as you said, went to college up north, Northern California. So it was a very small business school called Menlo College, and I know you're aware of it, but for your audience, like when I say a small college, I mean 700 students total. So it literally felt like a high school, but the good thing about that school was it forced me to it's not going to be your normal college experience. So I was working 2 jobs and,
Wow.
Definitely made my college career very, very focused and linear. So I actually did major in accounting, but in my in my last year and a half, I was able to take a real estate law class.
Great.
Yeah, and in that real estate law class, the professor was, I always consider him, his name's Harold Justman. He's pretty much like the reason that my mind even opened up to real estate. And he pretty much did, it wasn't like a class where it was like grading, oh, you get an A or get a B. He really, really valued just making sure that the students had an idea of real estate, what real estate investing means for yourself, your future generations, it being such a great wealth building tool. So that's what, that was kind of that light bulb. And then during my last year at my college, a buddy of mine started to create this, he called it the Menlo College Real Estate Investment Team, but it's hey, I created this club, I have no idea what to do with it. So it's hey, just take it and run with it. So
It's yours. Good luck.
Yeah, pretty much. So what we did, and it worked out perfectly, and it actually worked out perfectly for my career today, was we used the club to make it just a place where if students wanted to get into real estate after college, instead of figuring out what they want to do after college, at least they have the real estate license in college.
Wow, so
Yeah.
they got their license in college.
Yeah, so, and I actually was one of the first people to, be a part of that. And I remember we were getting a lot of pushback from the student body, because when the clubs that could go, it's oh yeah, I need money for this dinner that we're throwing. Everyone was okay, sure. And then we brought up something that to me felt really tangible. And I remember I was waiting out in the lobby for 15 minutes because the people that decided to get the funding for it were squabbling a little bit. So anyways, we got it, and as soon as that year ended, there was an award for the most impactful club for the school, and we won it. So
Amazing.
Yeah.
So back to the actual mentors class. Did you go over contract law and landlord-tenant law, or was it more focused on investing and acquiring property?
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty much I would say his true passion for it was that investing mindset, and would bring people, whether it was up there. I think you probably have heard of that company, Daily on Real. So he brought in CEOs from real estate companies. He would. There were certain friends of his that would owned a lot of real estate, so just sharing their story. And then also one thing, it was a real estate law class, and I would say that was such a game changer, because he would bring in expert witnesses or people he used to
Great
be
exposure.
Yeah, great exposure. And why I'm blessed with that is because he used like that gave me an extra layer of going into this industry, like not, so innocent eyed, like you really have to be, on your documents, you really have to do things the right way.
Devil's in the details.
100%.
So you learned that not just from the class, from an academic perspective, but all the guest speakers that came in, and also being in charge of the club.
Yeah, no.
So
absolutely.
by the time you were met with this opportunity with your family, could you elaborate on that?
Yes.
On how that
No,
first
no,
real
no.
estate transaction?
Yes. I'm glad you got us along that path. So it was funny because I got my real estate license after school because I majored in accounting, did a few did a tax internship, did property management, but I was like, I don't really want to do that. So I moved back home to Los Angeles, and I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. And I, for some reason, told myself, I'm not going to take on the real estate career unless I start off with the transaction, so at least I have that buffer, because with every real estate agent and what is known in the industry is like when you're starting, you need to have like 6 months worth of living expenses because it can take a very long time. And after this first transaction we're going to talk about, that's literally how long it took me to like prospect and do open houses to get my first deal. But how my first transaction came to be was my mom and uncle, my grandparents, they unfortunately, like, they lived in a pretty good size 4,700 square foot house with 2 stories, and I remember that house from when I was a kid. Like, those were some big staircases. So unfortunately though, they just their health was going downhill, and there was no way that they could live in a house like that. So but thankfully, and this is just why we get along, and I was able to be exposed at this like very early stage in my career. It's like they had a trust, and in the trust it had a power of attorney in case my grandparents became incapacitated. So we had to put them in a home, and another thing that my grandpa was pretty smart about is he got an amazing long-term care plan, which they definitely don't make they don't make this type of policy anymore, but pretty much it's taking care of their long-term care for life. So I definitely know, they do not make those types of policies anymore.
He's lucky.
So of course it was a sad and unfortunate situation, but of course, and it was a house that just wasn't going to be a good rental. So my mom and uncle came to me and say, like, hey, you've got your real estate license, you want to sell this thing? So I was like, hey, this is what I told myself, the opportunity's coming to be, so I'm pinning my ears back and full steam ahead.
And back to the whole concept of the power of attorney, you brought that up.
Yeah.
People think, like husband and wife, okay, it's a community property, our house is owned jointly, and if something happens to my husband, no problem, I'll be able to sell the house or encumber it by renting it out. Not the case, right?
Right.
I mean, you have to have that power of attorney to be allowed to sell property or encumber it or even have access to bank accounts. So it's a dangerous situation to meet with an incapacitated spouse when you're not prepared with that power of attorney. But thankfully, your grandparents had that in place.
Yeah.
So your grandmother or whoever passed first could take care of the day-to-day affairs of running the household and keeping themselves alive.
Right. Well, the thing that was interesting with their scenario was it was actually kind of crazy. Like, both my grandparents became incapacitated. So, like, at the same time. Like, maybe not the exact same time, but it was just kind of crazy how it...
Pretty close.
Yeah, pretty close in time. So, but again, that power of attorney made it so that my mom and uncle, could take the reins on that.
Yeah, they're the designed agents under that trust provision for the power of attorney, so they could handle the day-to-day affairs for your grandparents. Brilliant move.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, I talk about some of the good decisions that my grandparents made, I know it's a little bit not as much of a predatory practice now, but those reverse mortgages, so...
Scary.
Yeah, definitely scary. So, but again, because of the power of attorney, what allowed my mom and uncle to do, it gave them to the authority to, they pretty much like cleared that balance, so they didn't have to like worry, about that encumbrance on the property when we were selling the home.
And it made it easier for you as their agent to resolve
Yeah,
the
well, and
transaction and
especially
sell it.
this is my first transaction, so you know what I mean. Like, let's just say it wasn't. Thankfully, it was my family that allowed me to, kind of like learn on the fly with that. But those things in place did make it a lot easier for me to, learn on the fly.
And Andrew, I've talked about sort of the antithesis to that situation, where you've come across people that are in nightmare situations because they either didn't have a trust,
Right.
or in this particular case recently, we can't mention names, but you have a current client and their trust is not funded yet.
Right. Yeah. And you and I have been having a lot of conversations about it. And the thing that's so frustrating is they're doing all the right things, like they're getting everything in order because unfortunately a family member of theirs the writing is on the wall, unfortunately. But yeah, it's just, and what you're telling me as far as like the code of ethics for an attorney, it's just an absolute.
I mean, there are lawyers that charge extra for funding, and just so our audience knows what funding means, it actually means if you have real estate, to transfer that property into the trust by two things, at least here in Los Angeles County. You have to have a quit claim deed, giving your interest in your property into the trust, and two, a preliminary change of ownership.
Right.
And if you don't do those two forms correctly and pay the recording fee, then you've got a car that has no engine, basically. That's the analogy.
Right.
So, do you want to buy a brand new Mercedes without an engine? Probably not.
You're not going to get too far.
Yeah. And do you want to hire some lawyer and pay him $4,000, and now you have a trust that might go through probate? I mean, wasn't that your entire intention
Right.
of setting up the trust to avoid probate court?
Yeah.
So your heirs could get the property quickly, and without hiring some lawyer for $80,000 to file some papers?
Well, yeah, no, 100%. And, I think what's so good about what you do, because, in my experience, I've worked with, a fair amount of trust sales I say unfortunately in the sense that, I wish they got them in a trust, but we were still able to, sell their home through the probate process. But just putting in a trust, or like, if you just like call some random attorney, just to get the trust created, a lot of times like, it feels like 50-60% of the people that just do it that way don't get that proper counsel or just like that proper care. Like I know I've seen from you of just kind of talking about different scenarios and not just being like in and out, and really caring about just the protection of their estate.
Thank you, Andrew. And just a little disclaimer here, brought that up in my mind. We're not giving you legal advice, so this is just educational and informational. We want to inspire you to plan accordingly and take care of your family. So when you are ready to sell your property or to buy property, you're in the right position.
Right. And I mean, because I feel in my experience as a real estate agent, I've spoken to many different fields, attorneys in different fields of law. And the thing that I really love about the trust attorney relationship is it's not like your, usual type of like, oh, like it needs like a, consultation, and the consultation is this amount. Like, I genuinely feel like when, especially, well, I would say unfortunately I've spoken with trust attorneys that, just kind of like leave me high and dry as far as like some critical questions for my clients. But when you have the right one like you,
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. When you have the right one like you that truly cares, like you can, really ask them questions and really feel it out, because as you experience, when someone's getting a trust, it's not like just one day the light bulb comes on. It's kind of like they have to like hear
I
about
need a trust in the morning or else.
I know, just like a cup of coffee. But yeah, so in regards just to the field of law, it feels that the trust attorney or learning process through it is very educational, and it's not like twist your arm type, or it's not super dire unless unfortunately the worst case scenario happens.
Tell us about some other sort of horror stories that you've experienced, either when somebody didn't have a trust or they did and it wasn't structured properly, if you can remember.
No, actually, it's funny you bring that up. I actually sold a property. It was the beginning of 2022. It wasn't a trust, but I guess the beneficiaries were butting heads so much that it actually did turn into a probate.
Ugh.
So it's like they did all the legwork for it. Then it
became contested.
Right, it became contested, so it just ended up turning into a probate situation. So that's one that comes to mind, and then I would just say the transactions that I've done where probate was involved, it's just more of when I'm talking with these sellers, they just are thinking, I wish I put in a trust. And then also, I would say some good information to talk about is the transaction changes when you're selling as a trust or selling as a probate. So when you're selling as a trust, it's very straightforward, pretty straightforward in regards to treat it like a normal transaction. So all the components are usually the same. The escrow period is usually the same as a normal transaction. That earnest money deposit, so the amount that people have to put in once an offer is accepted, that amount's usually the same. So it's very, very straightforward, and that's like where a trust is very key in that. So when you're selling as probate, you have to confirm, one, if it needs court confirmation or not court confirmation. So not having court confirmation, it's still pretty straightforward, but you don't know if that's going to be guaranteed.
It's an extra step, and it could take a while.
Exactly. And then, of course, if you need court confirmation, which is the worst case scenario, is the earnest money has to be 10% down as far as just the amount that gets put into escrow. And then once the contingencies are removed, that's when the probate attorney can officially go and get the court date. And if, let's just say, you found a deal, that property then, that court date, what that means is that the property could be overbid. So let's just say you think you got a deal, and then some investor that you had no idea existed comes to the courthouse, and then all of a sudden the minimum bet that you can go over is 5%. But still, like, what if someone's like, "Hey, I'm gonna, overbid 5%?" Then that buyer,
take you out of the game.
Exactly, and on top of that, it takes such a long time. So it's like the person's like fingers crossed, like hopefully nothing happens. So that's another reason.
Or if somebody got approved by an FHA lender for an FHA property, and they're going to be paying 5%, now they got to pay 10%, right?
Well, I mean, frankly, FHA is like really challenging to make a probate happen, because the one thing too is more times than not, like a seller of a probate property is not going to be doing any work, and an FHA or a VA loan, when they do their appraisals, they're a little more scrutinous in the sense of the property has to be in really good condition. So if the property's in pretty rough condition, more times than not, it's either going to be conventional or an investor type of product. So, and that's another thing too of the probate versus trust. The probate can potentially limit your buying pool in that aspect.
So many disadvantages. I never even thought about that.
I know.
So getting back to, you mentioned the word veterans, and I know that you have a relationship with a veterans organization, and that's kind of keeping you fairly busy recently. Can you talk about that relationship and how that's working out for you?
Yeah, no, it's been very good. I mean, just first and foremost, I'm so grateful for our veterans, and if any of you guys, thank you for your service. And so working with veteran clients is definitely a backbone of my career. So, and I've got family that served in the military. Some of my dearest friends have served in the military, and like about 2 years ago, I found this organization called Veterans United. So pretty much what their role is they're kind of a VA lender, and they will partner me with veterans, and pretty much it's been definitely, at least the start of the year, it's been a pretty busy start. And when it comes to helping veterans, because the VA loan, it's a great loan product, getting to put 0% down, no PMI, a lower rate. The only challenge is that appraisal, tends to bring a lot of things to light that a lot of sellers don't really want to have to worry about what's called those VA repairs. So I always tell my veterans, if you can think buying at the end of the year, at the very beginning, because that's when a lot of the buying pool is either preoccupied with the holidays or like the other buyers are thinking about taxes, that's a really good time for the veterans to
That's a
take
great
advantage.
tip.
Yeah.
Anything else a veteran who might be interested in buying a house should know about in terms of the benefits, other than the 0% down payment? Do they have to stay on the property for a certain period of time, or
No.
can they sell it at any time?
Yeah, they can. Yeah, they can pretty much sell at any time. So, I mean, California, you pretty much get to use your VA once. But let's just say you're buying, because I don't know the exact number right now, but I believe it's like 500,000 you can use of VA loan. So if you're living somewhere in the Midwest where properties, let's just say, are 200 grand, you could use your VA loan multiple times.
Wow.
Yeah.
Even for investment property, or is it just for primary residences?
Just for primary residence, but pretty much, and this is like whether you're a veteran, first-time buyer, or just any client of mine, an investment strategy I always like to say or like to use is starting off like buying a home that's probably, let's just say, 900 to 1,000 square feet, because and the VA you can probably only use once, but as long as you're moving up in as far as size of home, you can keep utilizing like the smaller down payments. So I have clients that kind of have used like houses as stepping stones. Maybe their dream house wasn't that first home, but
They're moving that direction.
they're moving up. But as they're moving up, they're all of a sudden getting these investment properties along the way.
And one other question about the veterans program: can somebody assume a veterans loan?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. So with the VA loan, it is an assumable loan. However, it has to be done by a veteran. And how you assume it is, let's just say the person bought the home for $300,000.
Right.
Let's say the home is worth $500,000 now. So the person would have to put in 200 grand to keep that loan, because pretty much what they're doing is, since they're assuming the loan, they have to make up that difference with out-of-pocket funds.
Oh, so the 0% down payment doesn't exist anymore?
No, so unfortunately that it doesn't exist for that, but let's just say, there's a veteran that does have those means,
Right.
but they don't want to pay the current market rates, and let's just say that VA loan was in the threes, then all of a sudden, like they paid 200 grand, but they've got a rate that people are
no
pretty much
PMI?
no PMI, no PMI whatsoever.
So that's a big benefit right
Yeah,
there.
and then FHA is also the only other type of assumable loan. Same thing, where you have to make up the difference, but again, the average rate right now is high sixes, low sevens. If you see an assumable loan that's in the high twos or threes, and if you've been keeping your powder dry, it might be worth it.
Well, that's great. So again, we're here on Trust the Plan with our first and great guest, Andrew Hart, and he works for a brokerage called Randy Place.
Yeah, so like real estate, it's kind of all over the place, but yeah, so I'm part of a team called Randy Place and Associates, and we hang our license at a brokerage called Real Broker.
And your office is located in?
So our office is located in Woodland Hills. We serve pretty much all the greater Los Angeles County, Ventura County, and I would say before we get going, there's definitely something that, because I feel ever since that first transaction in my career, just understanding trust and sharing about trust has been so important. And there was it was back in 2019, there was Prop 19 that they were throwing out there.
Right.
And I felt like a lot of the people in my industry were really pushing it, because the way that they marketed it was that it's going to be creating more inventory. But because of the real estate, my real estate mentor from Menlo College, that was one thing he really talked about, is like how the trust is so good for real estate preservation, in the sense that your capital gains basis goes up, so that you're avoiding capital gains, but your property tax basis stays the same. So with that,
Used to be that way.
right, of course. So yeah, it was amazing to hear that. So Prop 19 passed. So what the devil in the details is that they were going to, if let's just say like that type of situation happened, the investment, like the primary would keep would get the stepped up basis for capital gains, it would keep the tax basis, but what they were going to do for investment properties is the tax basis would go up for those. And that's how they they framed Prop 19 saying there's going to be more inventory because people that are inheriting those properties, they don't want to pay those crazy property taxes with a stepped-up basis.
Right, and as you may know, a stepped-up basis would have been or could be a great benefit to the people that are beneficiaries and they inherit that property. You might also know that a year or so ago, it used to be advantageous to have a revocable trust because the beneficiaries of that trust would inherit your stepped-up basis. That was done away with, and so I got a lot of calls when this law changed, and a lot of people wanted to have irrevocable trust to replace the revocable trust. What is the danger with that? Well, if you have an irrevocable trust, you're actually giving your property away to your beneficiaries during your lifetime, which is kind of ironic because a revocable trust is also called a living trust,
Right.
but it doesn't kick in until you die.
Right.
Now, the irrevocable trust operates while you're alive, and what is the scary thing about an irrevocable trust?
It's permanent.
Yes, and now your beneficial owners own the property. So I had a situation, a little story. I had represented a plastic surgeon up in Northern California, and he decided he wanted to take advantage of the stepped-up basis for his kids and create an irrevocable trust. Well, you know what happened? Is his kids, or one of the kids, was trying to evict the father from his own house, which he could do because he owned the house. The son now owned the house.
Oh my God.
So yeah, he's getting the stepped-up basis, but what kind of an assault to the father who set this thing up? As I learned when I was in law school from my contracts professor, no good deed goes unpunished.
Seriously.
Which is a horrible thing to say, but it's true.
Right. 3 things with that story: the path to hell is always paved with the best of intentions. I hate that saying because I want to do good, and I do good, but so many people, by doing the right thing, always get the crappy end of the stick when it comes to that. Second, so just backtracking on this new law that came about. So this is also including your primary residence.
Everything.
Yeah.
Investment primary residence, you don't get the stepped-up basis anymore unless you have the irrevocable trust.
And that's just the reason why that frustrates me so much is, from what I learned, very early on in my career, just about the benefits of trust. It just feels like that's they're still good and they still protect and they still, do have an important role, but it seems like the things that were so beneficial about them are just getting yanked, and that's what's really frustrating.
Yeah, but luckily we still avoid probate with a trust.
Of course.
So you avoid the delays of getting your assets into the hands of your beneficiaries. And you don't have, I'm sorry, but you're not going to have to pay a lawyer, your kids won't have to pay a lawyer 8%. So let's say you owned $1 million house, which is pretty likely these days if you live in the Los Angeles area.
Easily.
That means 8% is going to go to the lawyer, $80,000.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes it's worth it because it's a very complicated probate, but it's a simple probate.
Yeah.
I always ask, hey, this is kind of a no-brainer question. What would you like to do? Create a trust for under $3,000 today, or have your kids pay $80,000? And that at no time is that going to go down in the future.
No.
That's going to only go up because probate judges are prior lawyers, so they're going to approve the probate fees for their friends, their golf buddies.
Oh yeah, absolutely, right on the links. And then, sorry, my third point that I was going to get to.
Oh, sorry to interrupt.
No, it was a perfect explanation, but just super ironic that the case that you had where the son was trying to evict him, he must have not looked at his tenant landlord laws, because it's really hard to get a tenant out of California.
Oh my God!
And it's like the tenant is literally the person that created the trust. So, at least
quick story. I owned some property in Van Nuys. It was a triplex, and around the coronavirus, the tenants there just decided to stop paying rent. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, at that time, you couldn't evict a tenant for non-payment of rent. But these guys didn't even apply for the coronavirus program. Oh. And one tenant made the stupid mistake of moving her boyfriend into the property. Not only that, he had his mail sent to the property, and I saw it. Okay. So all I had to do is go to court and said, look, she's in breach of the lease because she moved her tenant in her boyfriend in as a tenant, which is breach of lease, so that's how I was able to get him out.
Yeah,
But if it was just for non-payment of rent,
you just
forget it.
Unfortunately, though, I mean, that was just based on an act of luck for you, but an act of stupidity on the tenants.
Yeah, that is not very much. Nowadays, it probably takes at least 6 months to try to evict it.
Yeah.
And then, that assumes that everything goes smoothly.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and of course, we're not like bashing tenants whatsoever.
No.
But at the same time, a lot of the people that we're serving are people that are buying real estate and doing it for the right reasons to build wealth, to be able
provide housing for people.
Exactly. So I just want to say, because everyone starts as a tenant at some form of your life, and it's an important step. But
it is.
Just sometimes, when we kind of see where our state goes as far as kind of favoring one side, we unfortunately get to experience the brunt of it from.
Yeah, and California is very tenant oriented, as you may know.
Yeah.
But one last thing before we sign off on Trust the Plan, Andrew, what are you looking for now in terms of? I know you've worked with veterans, but is there some special projects or investment opportunities that you're trying to get clients for, or is it across the board?
I guess just some things that I've been hearing about this year that are pretty cool is the Cal. I forget the it's like the acronym, but they were doing it in 2023. They stopped in 2024, and they've kicked back up in 2025. They're actually supplying grants for people to create additional dwelling units on their property.
ADUs.
Yeah, ADUs. Yeah, I always say additional.
No, most people don't know what ADUs are.
Right. So they are providing grants for that. I believe the funding ran out in 23. They didn't have the program in effect for 24, but in 25, and from the information that I was able to get, pretty much the starting as far as what they're going to give you a grant for is $40,000. So
that's not bad.
Yeah, and also it could be for something that you're building from the ground up, or it could be
a remodel,
or an existing garage. So something that's already in place. So that 40 grand could cover, and that's just the low end. That's just what they said is the starting.
Wow.
So yeah, I would definitely say that is something that I'm sharing with my clients in the sense of if they've got the means, or if they've just have the space, or have the current structures for. And I would say one thing that I've also been hearing about, and this kind of goes back to the veterans I've been helping, is there's a PACT Act. So actually a couple of things that relate to these the veterans, not having to pay property taxes. So first off, and they're not a guaranteed thing, but veterans, if let's just say they were, if they got disability from their time in the service, if they're on full disability, if they go to their appropriate county, they potentially could be approved to not pay property taxes, and then that same thing where they don't have to pay property taxes was something called the PACT Act. So the PACT Act is something I heard about recently, where if they served in an area that had, hazardous materials that they were around, there's that PACT Act that's going out. So if a certain veteran qualifies for it, they may be eligible to not pay property taxes.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's a deserving benefit for the people that served our country.
Absolutely.
And protect us.
Absolutely.
So, one final question, Andrew, before we let you go. I've heard, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, that you can now develop more rental units on a piece of land than before because of the housing shortage here in Los Angeles County?
Yes, actually, so there's actually I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's a good thing. So there's two that come to mind for me. So and I think a lot of people heard of this one, is SB 9. So there's a specific amount of criteria that has to be met for this, but if your property's in a R1, it has to be zoned in R1, you can actually, and the lots, the lot, it's probably got to be a pretty, normal size lot for a single family residence with the R1 zoning. You can divide the lot into two, and you're able to put a duplex pretty much on each of those lots. So you're able to actually have four units total now on one lot. So
That's great.
yeah, so SB9 has definitely been something. Believe it passed. I'm blanking. It was either end of 21 or end of 22, but
So fairly recently.
yeah, fairly recently. But then there was one that got passed the beginning of last year, which I haven't heard too many people utilizing yet. There was one that like really piqued my curiosity, was AB 1033. So what that one was, kind of similar to SB9, but how it would work is, let's just say you had a property and you were on a pretty decent sized lot and you built an ADU. So again, an additional dwelling unit is still technically part of the property.
Even though it's detached.
Right. So what AB 1033 allows you to do is you can actually now subdivide it so that property is a sole separate property that you can actually just sell. So where I thought it was pretty advantageous is, let's just say it's an older couple, and the house is a little bit too big for them, but they're like, there's no way that we can afford anything else, and we have the means to make an additional dwelling unit. They can create that, subdivide it, sell the bigger house, and then they can pretty much technically still live in the ADU because they own it.
Right, that's
so,
great.
So that was one that was pretty cool. The only kind of interesting caveat with that is, with that, when you do create like that additional dwelling unit, it's viewed as a condo in the sense that you have to create, I believe it's like bylaws, CC&Rs that are part of the single family house. So areas like Washington State and Texas have been using that for a while, and it's been pretty successful over there. So that was definitely one I haven't seen a lot of people utilizing yet, but it was one that was like, oh, this is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and even after the fires here, that might be an option for people to actually buy an ADU temporarily before they can move back in their house.
Exactly.
And then they can rent it out later.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So
It's a great plan.
yeah.
Well, thank you. Speaking of plan, thank you for following us on Trust the Plan. And thank you so much, Andrew. And I love Andrew's slogan, which is follow your heart? Or
Follow your heart home, and that heart is my last name, H-A-R-T, so...
That's brilliant.
Yeah, thank you. And
thanks again for
Carrie,
being on.
thank you for having me, and
Andrew,
we can pretty much talk about trust till we're blue in the face. So.
And real estate.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
It's a great show. Really thank you for being our inaugural guest.
Yes.
And we hope that you, as our audience, learned something and will come back more. Again, we're not giving you legal advice. This is just information to help you with your life and to become prosperous.
We'd like to thank our guest, real estate agent Andrew Hart. You can get in touch with him at followyourhearthome.com. You can also find us at bhestateplanning.com. Remember, every plan starts with a conversation. So, keep an eye out for our next episode where we'll unpack another layer of the planning puzzle. Until then, stay informed, stay curious, and trust the plan.